I'm pretty sure it was 89. I'm 43 now. This happened when I was approximately 13. I'm from Pittsburgh. People think Pittsburgh is either country or city, but it's both. I live about 12, maybe 20 miles. Well, the incident happened probably 20 miles away from the city, about 15, 20 minutes in a car. Heavily wooded, but not rural, if that makes sense. Like there's towns and then woods, and then towns and then woods. And my dad owned a local bar, and it was like a honky-tonk type bar. And me and my friends, we didn't sneak out, but we stayed out later than we should have. So there was curfew, and since my dad owns a local bar, he knew all the police and knew everybody. So to get home, we used to cut across, I wouldn't call it a highway, but it's a busy road, but there's no streetlights. It's super dark. And then we would walk across the roof of this place called Radform. And they made vinyl extrusion window parts, but, that's either here nor there. And they had skylights on the building. So we would have to dodge the skylights, and we wouldn't make noise. We're not like boom, 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 across the roof, because we didn't want people to know we were cutting across the roof.
Right.
So we would climb this like fire escape thing, go across the roof, and it just so happened that the building was like nestled back. And then on the other side of the building was like, I called it a cliff, but it was more like a hillside.
Mm-hmm.
And you could climb up this little hillside, go straight through a park, and there was my dad's building, the bar, and we lived upstairs. So you could pretty much go from where we were hanging out all the way to my dad's bar through kind of the woods, except for Radform. So you wouldn't be seen by anybody, but there's no street lights and no light other than the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of cars in this area. There's a car and then no cars,
Mm-hmm.
People that live there go back there, but, it's not busy, if that makes sense.
Right.
And these woods, there's like pockets of woods that connect with other pockets of woods because of the way, just like you said in Oklahoma, the development, like bedroom communities.
Yes.
There's like a community, and it's a very mountainous, hilly, region. So instead of, chopping away at a mountain, they just don't build there. And there's a mountain and then another town on the other side of the mountain. And some of the mountains are huge and some of the mountains are little. But all these woods around here do connect. I learned this later in life. So we walked across the roof like we did 110 times before. But before we went up on the roof, I remember looking around, and it was super quiet that night. Like, when I look back at the incident, just like that guy, you think of so many things that you should have paid attention to. It was super quiet. No, it was fall, so there weren't like frogs, but you would hear like raccoons and stuff in the woods. But we didn't hear anything. And I remember looking around before I climbed up the fire escape ladder thingy. And I thought, boy, that's odd that everything's so quiet. And it kind of like gave me the willies. So we go up there. I go first. My friend Jimmy went second. And my friend Carrie went third because she was kind of chubby. And we knew she needed help up the hill. So me and Jimmy are real lanky, like skinny people. And we were helping her up. And I remember when I turned around to help her, I saw something, but I thought it's a branch, it's a, whatever. Then she started, like, as we were reaching down to help her, she started screaming, and she's like, something's got me. I'm like, come on, you know what I mean? Like a branch got you. Your foot's stuck. And back then we were into, like, punk rock. So we all wore leather, boots, chain wallets, the jeans, punky kind of. So she had these heavy boots on, and I'm like, kick your boots off. But now she's like screaming, something's got me. So I'm looking, and I couldn't see anything at first. And then your mind can't grasp what you're seeing. Like, the rational part of you is like, there is absolutely no way. Like, I first thought maybe it's a guy in a mask trying to scare us from the rad form.
Mm-hmm.
Until I saw its arm.
It's okay.
Its arm looked like that of a dog.
Really?
But skinny. It wasn't big and muscular like the other people say they see.
Right.
And its upper body was wide, but it wasn't massive. And I could only see its upper body and its head. And it looked really like almost sick, skinny. And what made me think that is the hair, fur, whatever, was real sparse. And you know how when a dog has mange?
Yes, yes.
Its skin looks like psoriasis-y.
Yes, exactly.
Like scaly almost. That's what it looked like. And it had like sparse. Its head had way less face and stuff, had way less hair than the rest of it. The rest of its arms and stuff were hairy, but not. I want to say it more looked like mange.
Mange, okay.
Because it wasn't patchy, it was thin.
Okay.
It was thin. I think that's a better way to say it.
Okay.
It wasn't patchy, it was just thin. Like per square inch, there was less hair mass and more skin. So I don't know if this thing was sick or if that's what they look like. But its hand was like clawing at her leg. And it had a good hold of her foot. And I mean, I was no more than 3 feet, maybe a body length, her body length, and she was a little short girl. We were kids away from this thing. And it was cold, but you couldn't see our breath, but you could see this thing's breath.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't smoke. I think it was pissed off. And like, you know how panting, but you couldn't hear it pant. You could just see like it wasn't smoke. It was like mist. Like, how when a deer comes out or whatever in the morning and they breathe, you can see that.
Sure.
Like condensation or whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Exhalation. It had ears like a German Shepherd or a Doberman or whatever that are cropped, like up. And my initial thought was that they were horns and this thing was a demon because of my, Catholic school background, and we were messing around with Ouija boards and, the normal stuff kids, well, maybe that's not normal for all kids to do, but we did. So, like I said, my initial thought was that this thing was a demon till after the fact. It didn't bark, it didn't grunt, the only thing it did was like kind of breathe heavy, like a bull would, like a horse.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
you know how, or like a deer in rut when they, like, I don't know I'm not good at making sound.
It's almost like a snort.
And that's when the steamy stuff would come out of its nose. Its eyes, nose, and mouth were all really close together. Its muzzle wasn't long like a dog, but it was protruding. Its teeth, it did have canines, but it had almost, I saw this thing's molars. I saw everything inside its mouth. We were yanking her, and she's screaming, and I'm like, kick off your boots. And Jimmy froze. He really couldn't help. And me and Carrie are kind of the same, height, not weight, but I can't pull her up by myself. So I'm like, Jimmy, help, I can't get her. Like, this thing's pulling her. We're pulling back. And then my schooling or whatever, my religion kicked in, and I started praying out loud. And I didn't say in the name of Jesus, none of that. I think I started saying like Our Father or, Hail Mary or something. And then I said, oh, God, please help us. And no sooner did I say, oh, God, please help us, I think I might have even got us out. The thing hightailed it out of there, and that's when I saw the back of it. But I only saw it for a split second. It, like, arched its back, kind of, and, like, this is the part where I thought demon. And its legs, do you know what a minotaur is?
Yes.
It kind of looked like that, like its back legs were shaped real weird.
Was it like a dog hawk's, like the reversed?
Like thighs. Like it had thighs, and then you know how a dog's leg comes down and then like at an angle? Like they don't really have knees. They
right,
have like
it goes
a bend.
backwards. It reverses backwards, and they'll call that a hawk.
Yeah, I guess that's a better term. That's why I say minotaur, because you know how their feet are shaped.
Yeah,
that's the half goat thing from Roman or
exactly.
Greek mythology, right? Man on top and goat on the bottom.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay.
Wow.
It was super agile, and it didn't make noise. I mean, it crunched leaves and stuff, but it wasn't like wolfing and howling and like you see werewolf movies and all that. It reminded me of something like sickly, like it was sick. And, after the fact, I thought maybe it was just starving, and maybe it lives in those woods, and we were easy prey, or I don't know. And the way it, like, leaped away, it, like, cowered. Like, when your dog pees on the floor, and you're like, what did you do? It, like, put its head down, and its ears went back, and it, like, I'm doing it like you can see me.
No, go ahead.
It, like, crunched down, like, and looked back at us and did that thing again. And it was real weird looking, like, I want to say almost like a demon, but this thing was real. It wasn't my imagination, because the next day we went, to there in the daylight. I didn't sleep that night. I was praying, and I was just freaked out. And my dad and my uncles, everybody's a hunter. Like I said, I live in Pennsylvania. I can identify, a beaver to a turtle this was nothing I'd never seen before. I was a kid, so I couldn't tell you how tall or how much it weighed. It was bigger than us. And probably at the time I was 5 foot tall.
Wow.
But it didn't have a lot of mass. It wasn't like the Dogman I see people draw pictures of and stuff. It didn't have a muscular chest, and it was like gangly, like lanky and sickly looking. So we go the next, we get her home. Well, we get her up the hill to the light. There's a street light in that, there's a park there. She lost her boots. I'm looking at her leg. I'm still praying. I'm like, thank Jesus, thank God. And the kid Jimmy's still shook. He's over there like he don't know what to do with himself. And he grew up in, my parents got divorced, so I didn't live over there full time. I would go on the weekends, like kids of divorced parents do, and visit, and then go home to my real house.
Right.
But the neighborhoods are really close. And I found out later that the woods connect. So I think Jimmy was so shook up because he had a tree stand over there. And there's this place up there called the Old Lane where people used to race motorcycles, dirt bikes. It's an old, must have been service road or something. But it's got a chain that you have to unlock. And the asphalt's all messed up and stuff. But people, we, hang out up there, hunt. There's a creek, you fish, all that stuff. We spent a lot of time in those woods. So I wasn't allowed in the bar after 9:30. I wanted to tell somebody because I was totally freaked out.
Right.
And, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have none of that stuff. So anyways, I examined her injuries, and I'm like, Terry, you're tore up. Like, look at you. And she's like, what the was that? And I'm like, I don't know. She's like, because she'd never turned, well, she kind of turned around, but when you're being attacked, you're not trying to look at what got you. You're just kicking and clawing up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And its fingers, it's like either its fingers or its nails were super long, like weird long. And it had to be the claws because her leg was all ripped up. And she had on jeans and leg warmers. I don't know if you remember leg warmers.
Yes, yes.
I don't remember the boots, but I want to say they were like work boots, like Timberlands or, type of boot like that. Her leg was all scratched up, and they were like gouges, like you would see a whip leave.
Oh, wow.
Like deep, heavy, to the white meat gouges in her leg. And at first I thought they were bites because, like I said, your rational mind is like, no tree can do that. She didn't get her leg stuck in a tree. And the thing that confused me is the thing didn't make no noise. So that's what part of me thought, this isn't real. Like, this isn't happening. But then how could her leg be all messed up like that? So we're like, what are we going to tell our parents? And, trying to figure out whatever. And Jimmy's still over there shook. And finally he says, shut the fuck up. That thing is still out there. Because, 2 girls were hysterical. We're still right there in the vicinity, less than 10 feet away. There's this old wishing well right there that they fill with cement so no kids would fall in it.
Okay.
So I had her laying on the cement inside the wishing well. It's like totally level with the circle of the wishing well, and I'm looking at her leg. And I'm like, say we wrecked Jimmy's motorcycle, or say, like, trying to think up a lie. And I'm like, because if we tell our parents what we saw, they're still not going to believe us. And now it's got to be 1 o'clock in the morning at least. And the moon was big. It wasn't bright, but I don't know if you've ever lived in the country, your eyes get used to seeing in the night, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can see with the moonlight. If the clouds go over the moon, I'm not saying you can't see your hand in front of your face, but you can't see real far. And the moon is shining and the stars, and then that one street light. And Jimmy's pacing now at the tree line. And I'm like, what are you going to do? He finally got himself together, and he had like a ninja knife, the kind of knife that boys used to, it wasn't a switchblade, but it was like a Chinese knife that you flip around in your hand and you can do like tricks with.
Oh, yes, yes.
You know what I'm talking about? Back in the 80s.
Yeah, I know
like
exactly.
When Karate Kid came out, it closed like a comb. They had made combs like that. He had one of them, and he's standing there flipping it, doing the tricks. And I'm like, what are you going to do, tough guy? You didn't even help me, lift her up. So I'm like, we need to clean your leg out. You got to come to my house because, like I said, my dad was in the bar downstairs. I was the only one that we could get in and out of my house without adult, seeing us. Because if she went in her house, they would hear or see us. So I'm like, come over, we'll clean your leg. But I wasn't allowed to have boys over, so I was like, Jimmy, you got to go. He was like, walk me home. We're all arguing about who's going to walk who home. I'm like, you're the dude. You should walk us home because me and Carrie lived. You could open her window and I could talk to her, but there was a road in between, but it was an alley. But, you could see each other's house. So I get her upstairs. I'm like, take your pants off. And I'm looking at these cuts, and they're like nothing I've never seen before. Like I said, it was through every layer of skin. We call it to the white meat, but there wasn't like muscle or nothing hanging out. She could have used stitches, but, we're kids. We're trying to,
Right.
lie and sneak around and
Sure,
smoke cigarettes and be kids. Well, not kids, but, teenagers. She's like, what am I going to tell my parents about my boots? I happen to have a pair of boots like it. I said, wear these home and we'll go get your boots tomorrow because none of us were going down there, back there. So now we're talking, and I'm in my mind. John was like, do you think that was the guy from the factory? And she's like, that was no man. And I said, well, what did it feel like? And she's like, and neither one of them have religious nothing. Not there. They don't go to church. They know who God is and all that. And she's like, I swear to God, it was trying to drag me to hell. And I'm like, that's funny you say that. Because my gut thought demon. But, like I said, I'm not a kid, but I'm young. And I know about Bigfoot. Like my dad, he was a storm chaser. I don't know if you know what that is, but
Oh, yeah.
when there was like a storm, there was no tornadoes here, but like in Butler, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, he used to like to go after the storm or during the storm. He'd put us all in his, we called it a shag van, and we would drive out and just look, at the destruction. And we had a hunting camp in Punxsutawney. I know what bears are. I know what they look like. I know what they sound like. I know that they don't attack people. I know that wasn't a deer. There's no moose. It looked like an extremely big dog man. And then when I got about 19, I saw this thing called the rake. But it's not a real creature. It was like on one of those haunted shows. And that's why I made my mind up that that's what it was. I'm like, it was the rake. It wasn't real because, again, you don't want to believe that there's something like that out there in them woods that you hang out in. Your house is right there.
Exactly.
So and then I thought, well, why did it go away when I prayed? That doesn't make any sense. So I was convinced that it was the rake until I got about 35. Like I said, I'm 43 now. And the internet came more popular, and I started watching more shows. And when something like this happens to you, you almost get obsessed about it. Like you want an answer. You want a logical, like you want a hair sample, you want a saliva sample, you want some. And again, we didn't want to tell nobody because A, we're not allowed to cut across the roof of rad form. B, we were doing something we shouldn't be doing. Why were we out after curfew? All that. So we all agreed not to tell nobody. But I ended up telling my dad. I was like, Dad, a couple nights ago, something she got Carrie and whatever. And he's like, what do you mean? Show me. So this is where the next day, this is another part of the story. So a few days later, the next day, we go down to get our boots. There are these like gouges, deep furrow gouges, and not from her shoe in the hillside. And the hillside doesn't have no weeds. Like the path that we take, animals must take. You know how it's like worn down?
Right.
Like there's no vegetation, just like right there. Between there's like a couple trees that you can kind of squeeze through, and there's no vegetation. Or the other people cut through there. We never really knew. So the things in the hillside had perfect spaces for what looked like Jimmy even took his hand down there and held his hand there. And I'm like, that mother was huge. Its hand could have palmed a basketball easy. That's how far away apart the gouges in the hillside were.
Good night.
But like where her foot was, she kind of messed up the marks, if that makes sense. Like, because she's trying to,
oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Scurry up the hill while this thing got her. And she's like flopping around like a caught fish. And we're yanking and whatever. So we go down further to investigate. What is there tracks? Is there hooves? Is there hair? Is there anything to prove that we really saw this thing?
Exactly.
There was poop. And it wasn't deer poop. It looked like a huge pile of dog poop. Like huge. And when bears poop, I don't want to talk about poop, but it looked like a huge pile of either human or dog poop right there. And Jimmy was like, that's the proof. That's the proof. Oh my God, that's the proof. And I'm like, what about the mark? He said, but that could be from her shoe. That could be from us. That could be from anything. He's like, ugh. I'm like, what are you going to do? Bag it up? And he was like, no, whatever. So, that was pretty much all Jimmy said about it. He wanted hard evidence. He was like a logical, rational, and me and Carrie are more, could believe in anything. You know, if you're sitting next to us and say you saw a ghost, we believe you. He is like, well, what'd you see? You know, what color was it? What did it look like? And, you know, he wants physical proof.
Right.
So I tell my dad a couple days later, I'm like, Dad, something going to Carrie the other night. He's like, what do you mean? Are you kids smoking that dope? And I'm like, put down, I swear to God. And growing up in a honky-tonk type bar, I mean, you know, people are going out back. You're not stupid. And I never really liked drugs or alcohol because I saw how stupid it made people act and how unladylike it made women. And, you know, it just seemed to act like a slob. And I think my religion kind of steered me away from drugs and alcohol. So we weren't drunk and we weren't high and we weren't nothing. So I'm like, Dad, come look at this. So I take my dad down, you know, it's literally across the street. Take my dad down there. I'm like, Dad, look, that's its poop. And my dad's standing there, and he's like, hold on. And then he's like, no, you come with me. So we go back up to the bar in the house. The bar's downstairs. There's 2 apartments upstairs. But my dad took the wall down, so we, you know, because he had 3 girls from his marriage, 3 girls from her marriage, and a son. So we needed 2 apartments.
Gotcha.
He goes and gets my uncle. They go upstairs and get a shotgun, and I'm like, whoa, why are you pulling the guns out now? And he's like, I don't know what the... And my dad really didn't swear in front of us, only when he was really mad or really scared. He said, I don't know what left in the woods, but this ain't normal. And he's a hunter, you know, he follows tracks, he's tracked deer. He's no, you know, Indian guy. But, you know, he knows paw prints to bear prints to... Like, he used to show me how deer rub their horns on a tree and what to look for when you're hunting to see if there's creatures there. So him and my uncle are up and down the woods and all over the place. And his name, my uncle's name's... They found a nest. I don't even know how to describe it, but it was way up on that old lane. It was all made out of bendable branches like wisteria, grapevines. It wasn't woven, but it was like crosshatch, if that makes sense. Like something that had thumbs had to make this thing.
Wow.
It looked like a den. And it wasn't, you know, there's caves all over the place for bears to go in, for, you know, foxes, bunnies. This thing looked like a Volkswagen Bug. That's how big this nest thing was. Big as a car. So my dad and uncle are looking at each other like, what the And my uncle's like, Joe, don't go in there. Your scent will be on there. We got to get out of here. So as we were walking up there, my dad's telling my uncle, and he's like, tell Dwayne what you saw. And I'm like, no. So I'm telling Dwayne, and he's like, you kids me, because my dad was kind of like a joker. He's like, you are all hitting me, and, you know, this is bullshit. They're just, I don't want to say country folk, because this isn't the country, but they're country folk, if that makes sense. Like good old boys. And, no, it's so... We're walking all through the woods looking for this thing, and then we find I call it a nest. My dad called it not a cave, but he had a word for it. I don't remember what he said it was. But there was not hay, but like dried up grass made in a bed. It looked like an upside-down bird's nest. It's exactly what it looked like. If you took a bird's nest, blew it up, and turned it upside down. And then inside were like anything soft, like cattail fluff, a bunch of dead grass and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So my uncle's accusing my dad of erecting this huge thing. And my dad's like, really, Dwayne, do you think I got the time? And he's like, the kids did it. So my uncle he's not a gimp, but he got hurt. I don't know if it was in Vietnam or the war, because you know how your parents are like, I walked up those hills, to school, both hills, and ate ketchup sandwiches, and he had a messed up leg, so he always had a big walking stick. And he's using the stick to poke around in the brush and stuff. And he pulls out the skull of a dog, and I know it was a dog because the way its nose was. He's like, Joe, look at this. And then he's poking around some more, and there's like garbage. But the garbage could have been from people,
Right.
like wrappers and cans. But then he finds a can that's all chewed up, like gnawed open. And they're both looking at each other, and I think that they didn't want to be scared in front of me.
Possibly.
Because they're my protector. And Dwayne's like, we need to get out of here after he found the bones. And there were other bones, like little bones. I thought they were chicken bones, but they'd have to be a big chicken. I'm not saying they were human bones. They were animal of some sort. And the way they were scattered about, like this was this thing's hive. This was this thing's home. This is where it took its food. This is where, where it bedded down.
Sure.
So like I said, my dad owned a bar. He knew the police. He knew, council people, everybody. So my dad's like, okay, it's time to go, after he found the bones and whatever. And we go home, and he's like, go upstairs and lock the doors. Don't come downstairs. You need me to call. I'm like, okay. It's like dinner time, and our kitchen upstairs was complete, but why would you eat in your kitchen when you could eat in the restaurant downstairs? So when we wanted food, we would either call the bar, or my dad rigged up this dumbwaiter system. It was actually a 5-gallon bucket and a hole drilled in the floor, and that's how he would bring us food up. Because the LCB didn't allow kids in the bar after 9:30. Or they were doing stuff in the bar that they didn't want the kids to see. So I'm like, what if I get hungry? And he's like, ring the bell and I'll, whatever, just stay in the house. So I'm like, okay. No sirens, no nothing. Like 5 police cars show up. They bring an ambulance. He's like, where's Carrie? Now he's pissed. Where's Carrie? I'm like, dog, because Carrie's dad was real mean. I don't know if you know who the pagans are, but her dad was a pagan, and he was real mean. And I'm like, he's going to beat her ass. He's going to beat her ass. You think he doesn't know that her leg is all tore up? I'm like, he don't. You know how he is, because he was real particular about having your doors closed when you're changing. And, he didn't want to look at his daughter with no clothes on. He would yell if she wore a belly shirt. He was just real particular about his daughter. And he's like, go get her. And he watched me cross the street, knock on her door, get her, and bring her over. I'm like, Dad, why are all these cops here? And what the hell's going on? He's like, Carrie, tell the man what happened to you and show him your leg. And it was just local police and a local ambulance. So she's like, am I going to have to get rabies shots in my stomach? And, terrified. So I bandaged up her leg, a couple days ago, and I showed her how to change, because this wasn't just a Band-Aid. You needed, like, gauze and pads and all kind of stuff. So the ambulance driver looks at her leg, and they're like, she could have used stitches a couple days ago. Can you bend your leg? She's bending her leg, showing them she can move her ankle. But her ankle was real swollen. After the fact, we found out she probably sprained or dislocated her ankle. It wasn't broke because she could walk. But, so they're like, do you want to go to the hospital? And don't tell my dad. Please don't tell my dad. They're like, where's your mom? And she's like, she's at work. She works at the local food land. So they sent a policeman up to that food land. So now they're talking on the radios. And they know her dad, and they know that he's, I don't know, a bit of an a-hole. So, the one policeman's with her mom, and she's like, is my daughter okay? Whatever. And because you could hear her through the radio. And they're like, Patsy, can you take a break? You need to come outside, and we need to talk to you. And are my kids okay? They're like, yeah, everything's fine. Carrie and Lenny, they're fine, because she had an older brother. And so Carrie's telling the officer with us what happened, and the officer's relaying it to Carrie's mom. And she's like, when did this happen? And is she okay? And they're like, yeah, everything's fine. Because I think they wanted to take her to the hospital, but they needed parental consent to take her to the hospital. But the EMT was like, it's too late now to stitch it. She needed medical attention that night. And you kids, if anything ever happened to you, but nobody at this point was saying out loud what had her. My dad, my uncle, me, nobody. Nobody wanted to break the ice and say, not Bigfoot, but I said that it looked like a demon is the only word I could come up with at the time. I was like, this thing looked this big. And so I forget how the ice got broke. And I think she might have said, it was a monster or something like that. And they're like, monster? You kids made up this story to cover up the fact that... And my dad was like, no. He's like, me and Uncle Dwayne went down there, and there's evidence that there's no way these kids are lying. And I think one of the policemen went down to Radform to ask them guys if they dressed up in some kind of costume and tried to scare us because I think I'd mentioned that. I said, I thought it was one of the guys from the Radform, and, I thought he was just trying, because this was Freddy Krueger days when that movie came out. So I'm thinking, maybe it was one of them claws from, like, Kmart, because the way it cut her leg and what it looked like. So they go down to Radform, and they're like, we'll ask the night guys, but I don't think, why would somebody leave their post at work to go scare some kids? And like I said, we were real quiet when we were walking across that roof because there were skylights, and you could see and hear. It was a tiny, gravel roof. You could hear a pin drop up there, but they had big machines in the building, so we weren't like up there lopping around and jumping around. So the policeman and whoever go down, and my dad shows them where it happened, and then my dad's like, you got to see this. So they go up in the upper woods, and he shows them the nest and whatever, but I didn't go with them. And they come back, and they all go in the bar. My dad locked the bar doors, which I thought was weird, really, really, really strange, because any opportunity to make money, he's going to leave them bar doors open. And we're sitting in the back of the bar, the restaurant, and he turns the jukebox up real loud. And there's all these police, and I don't know if there were game wardens, because, like I said, I was young teenager. At the time, I didn't know the difference between a park ranger. They all just look like police to me. But some of them didn't have gun belts on, if that helps. My dad's drawing beers from the tap, and he's like, this one's on me, fellas. And they're all literally grown men sitting there scratching their head, and we couldn't hear everything, but, you're peeking, you're nebbing, you're trying to see what's going on? Did we do something wrong? Did we conjure something with this stupid Ouija board? And there's all this stuff going through your head. And I don't think it was until like that part of the situation that I told them that it went away when I prayed. And because I didn't want to seem crazy. And part of me thinks that all those times my dad went storm chasing, he was really looking for Bigfoot, but he didn't want to tell his 3 young daughters that he's really looking for Bigfoot. So he called it storm chasing. Oh. And because how could you storm chase? Like, what are you looking at in the middle of the woods? He'd say, look how that tree snapped off, and, look at the power of Mother Nature. But like I said, hindsight's 20/20. You look back at situations and think, what was he really doing out there in the woods? So everybody's talking, and they all kind of agreed not to call any officials, not to tell any, because they were afraid that people were going to think they're nuts. At one point, they got a camera. I remember watching them because this was film. When film was real, and you had to put it in a camera. The police had a real nice big 35mm camera. They must have went up there and took pictures of everything. I wished I had those pictures, or somebody could get those pictures. Pets started coming up missing. excuse me, people started, because, word must have got out somehow. Somebody must have said something, because, again, my dad owned a bar.
Right.
So maybe somebody in the bar, you get drunk and you start talking, or the police might have told somebody. But pets, come missing all the time. If your yard's not fenced in, whatever. But they put a permanent, how on a farm, a fence made out of like pipe, metal, thick, like big, not just a chain across the road.
Sure.
They put a big, huge fence and locked it so we couldn't access that old lane, and that's where this thing's nest was, up in there. Now, you could still access the woods through the forest part, but they made it harder for us to go up there. And there was a waterfall and a creek, so this thing had fresh water. It had everything it needed up there to live. And I found it just really strange. I remember there being helicopters around and around and around and around and around. And the only helicopters we would see were like a Life Flight or the news. These weren't news helicopters. They were big, and they didn't go, they went thump, 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 thump. It was a noise I never heard before. I've been to the air show. It was a very strange helicopter sound. And it kept for like a week. From, when it was light, there were helicopters flying around this area. And I'm like, what the hell? But I never put two and two together. I never thought that, until I got older, that maybe that's what they were looking for. And the helicopters were dark, but not black. They weren't green either. They were different looking, too. They weren't the normal, skinny, like cucky helicopters. And I've seen war documentaries, so I know what military helicopters look like. Like I said, I've been to the air show, but these were like if you took an SUV, like a box,
mm-hmm.
and put helicopter stuff on it. It was real boxy, like square.
Mm.
And now I think that maybe that was some type of military helicopter I never saw before. Okay. And the reason it was so big and boxy is because maybe it was armored, or maybe it had enough people in it to jump out.
Possibly. Like a cargo carrier.
Yeah. So that, they could repel, if that's what it's called, not jump out of it, but like go down. And it was big enough to drag something out of them woods. And there was probably a dozen places that you could land a helicopter, but it never landed. And the thump, thump, thump is what I remember the most. Because a normal helicopter is like...
Right. Well, your
but this thing
military
like,
helicopters...
thump.
Your military helicopters tend to do that blade cutting through the air. It's pretty distinctive. I know exactly what you're talking about, and a lot of people do too. You can tell when military helicopters go over here in Tulsa versus a news helicopter.
Yeah, like that's maybe why they call them a chopper. I don't know. But it was a very scary, strange, surreal sound. And the neighborhood got real quiet, like weird. People didn't jog. They didn't go up to the old lane. There weren't kids drinking in the woods there. And this went on for probably 3 years before, not the helicopters and all that, but before things got to normal. Back to the way it was before. Hanging out and being able to do what you wanted and all that. Strange. And like I said, I was in Catholic school, so I went to school, and I was under the impression that if you didn't tell what you did wrong, you were going to hell. So if I died tonight and got hit by a bus, so I told the priest, and I went to face-to-face confession, not through the covered thing.
Right. Confessional booth.
Yeah, and I'm telling the priest, and he was like, "Are you smoking that marijuana?" And I'm like, No, we weren't drinking alcohol either. And because I guess that's the first thing they think, like you're hallucinating or you're whatever. And I kept calling it a demon because I didn't know what else to call it.
Right.
So the priest gives me my penance and tells me, what to do. And he's like, I don't remember if he asked my permission or not to talk to my parents, but he ended up calling my parents. My mom took me for a psych consult. My dad was like, fairies and unicorns are real. My mom was like, I don't want to say normal, but because that's not the way my mom was rational and my dad was fantasy. But now I know these things aren't fantasy. My mom was like, Joe, what are you doing to her? And are you filling her head with these things? And he's like, no, Cass, police are involved, there's evidence, there's proof. And so I tell my mom what happened, but I skip a lot of it because I don't, I want my mom to think I'm nuts. Psychiatrist says I'm sane. They give me some kind of weird test. I had to put pegs in holes and do all kind of weird stuff. Paper tests, write stuff down. They determine I'm fine. Everything's fine. She's rational. Because I guess my mom thought I was hallucinating or on drugs. I remember getting blood tests. I guess, now I think maybe that they were checking for drugs. I just don't know. Part of me is like, did this all happen? But the more I listen to shows like yours, the more I'm like, yes, it did happen.
Well, it's been going on for a long time, this cover-up, and, there's I would say a larger percentage of the population says that, oh, you're just part of that group, everything is a conspiracy. If you believe all that, you've been watching too much CSI, and a lot of that television mumbo-jumbo drama, everything is a conspiracy, and that this doesn't exist. If it did, surely somebody would say something, spill the beans, have an exclusive, the government.
I think the problem is people are spilling the beans, but the beans are getting put back in.
Well, that's a way to say it. I like that. Basically, when people will be contacted, first of all, people don't know any better, especially when they don't know these things exist. And then if there is contact made, either by these creatures on a human, if there's attack or some contact, aggressive contact is made, or a human has shot one of these and it's down, and the next thing is if someone calls, if someone in that party calls, if someone witnesses it that calls, that's what gets the ball rolling. Otherwise, if you don't say anything, nothing will happen. In our opinion. So what happens is that as soon as you call, it gets the ball rolling, and then in our opinion, who gets the ball rolling to get a federal level or military level is going to be, it can be any law enforcement, but I would say more so the Department of Natural Resources, Wildlife and Management, so such as your game wardens, game rangers, national park rangers. They've known about these for years and years and years, and they have direct numbers into a federal agency, which we're not sure what they're called. We just usually call them the Men in Black, that their job is to go out, is to cut the chatter. As you said, kind of put the beans back. So what they do is they make sure no stories are published. They make sure the radio stations don't talk about this. They at that time, it was kind of easy because it was prior to cell phones really kind of coming about. So it was easy to cut down the chatter. It's a little bit tougher nowadays. So what they do is all they have to do is give the perception that you're a little nuts. It doesn't have to be the truth. The truth doesn't matter. What it has to be is they
they could dig up something you did 10 years ago,
Yeah, or
that, might make you weird or whatever.
It just has to, and all they have to do is search your background, and if you're presently doing something or have done something borderline illegal or doing something that you shouldn't be doing, well, that makes their job so much easier because they don't have to create a lie. All they have to do is expose it, maybe blackmail you to say, if you don't shut up, we're going to bring this to the surface. So that makes their job easier. And if you're squeaky clean, then what they do next basically is just throw a lie out there. And then just if they say it enough and tell enough people in that community, it ruins your reputation, and then no one believes you about anything. So that's all they have to do, and that's all their job is. But first, they have to know what happened, and so they have to get a call from somebody. It's been going on way before the 80s. It's been going on a long time. We don't know.
So what do you think I saw?
Based on what you're describing, and you're correct that typically these, what we're calling at this point in time, Dogman creatures, it sounds like you may have come across either a one, like you said, it looks sickly. It was maybe old, immune deprived. Maybe it was malnourished. There's evidence that these things actually are in social packs or groups. And so,
I never even would have thought.
So maybe we don't know if this one was a loner.
Whew.
If this one was a loner, it sounds like it was. We don't quite understand not only them, these creatures, but we don't understand a lot about social structure, communication, especially when you're getting into the Dogman creature. So we know a little bit more about Bigfoot, but still not a lot. So it's hard to say what you saw, but based on what you did see, it falls more in line with a Dogman creature rather than a Bigfoot, just by the facial features. And I have a couple questions here, if you don't mind, to kind of go back.
Sure. I'm sorry I talk so much.
No, I'm glad you did. I'm glad. I wanted to just let you get it out and hear the whole story through.
And like that other guy, the confession helped. I don't want to say I felt dirty, but I felt strange not talking about it and not telling anybody. And then after I went to confession and did my absolution, I felt a lot better.
Absolutely.
And I thought, well, it's just because I went to confession. And it's just because I did my penance and,
well, when
all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't even imagine being there at that moment, as young as you guys were, not having no clue, no idea that this was out there, and then all of a sudden this happens. The amount of fright and fear when you finally started seeing and realizing that this was something real, I'm sure the adrenaline rush was tremendous, and your friend, I'm sure it had a huge impact on both of your friends. Well, all of you, obviously.
Well, they took out of her leg, they scraped, I don't know what they did, but it looked like they were taking not a sample of the wound. They had a slide, because I took biology class. I know what slides look like, and they put gloves on, the EMT, and he took like a spatula-looking thing out of a sterile thing. I'm like, oh my God, they're going to cut her. It looked like a scalpel. And he said, this isn't going to hurt, and they sprayed some stuff on it. Not iodine. I don't know if you remember mercurochrome. It wasn't that.
Yeah.
It wasn't red. It was no color. They sprayed. It didn't bubble either, like hydrogen peroxide. And she said that they had numbed it. But it was in a non-aerosol spray. They sprayed it, waited, fanned it with their hand, scraped it with this scalpel-looking spatula thing, put it on a slide, and put it in a baggie, and took it to the ambulance. I do remember that much. And then after the fact, for a good 6 to 9 months, a police car sat right outside the bar every single night. And I'm like, well, I can't sneak out now. But was he there to protect, me from sneaking out? Or was he there because the way the bar is, it's the rad form, the tree line, the park and alley, and my dad's bar, all right there.
I would venture to say...
Was he there watching for that thing?
Yeah, I would venture to say the latter rather than the previous of you leaving. And there's a couple things here that you don't... It sounds like you wouldn't know, or unless you were able to go back or talk to someone today that remembers all that, whether it's a police officer or your friends or people that had inside information, is that what did they learn after and didn't tell you guys? Was that something maybe?
Yeah, because we're kids.
Yeah, and you try to not put fear in kids by not hearing them talk.
And why did they put that big ass fence up? It looked like the kind of fence that like a ranch would have. Like it had a pin in it and a lock and it was as wide as the road. So it had to cost some money. So before there was just a chain on a couple trees, and you could undo the chain and, go in the road and put the chain back up. But this was like made out of big pipe, welded, heavy duty.
Well, it's, again, we don't know a lot of details of that particular, but another thing to think about is that it may have not have been anyone in the community that purchased that fence, but maybe was government purchased, if you know what I mean.
That's crazy you say that, because years passed, and now all over those woods it's posted, and we can never figure out why. U.S. government property.
Oh, really?
And it said BLM on it, and I didn't know what BLM meant until I got, 35. And I'm like, I'll be gone. How could the Bureau, they're not fracking over there. It's a mountain, hillside, cliff. Like I said, there's an old lane. There's a bunch of rundown houses. It's like, we call it spooky woo-woo forest. I said, people go up there and race, bonfires. I don't know if you grew up in an area like that, but
it's
nobody went up there after that. And there were all these signs nailed to the trees, like a perimeter all the way around. You couldn't go to the stream no more. You couldn't go to the waterfall. Couldn't do none of it.
And for people that are listening, BLM is Bureau of Land Management, and these signs do get posted up. Now, again, I'm not going to say I'm the expert at this. I'm just trying to put things together. But in our opinion, when you have areas and sightings of these creatures, I don't care if it's Bigfoot or Dogman or other creatures that people see, very close witnesses, or there's been contact made, our opinion is that you will have the government come in there, and if they can, and again, this sounds far out there, I realize, but in our opinion, if they will acquire these lands and quarantine this area off. And
that's such a good word for it, quarantine. It's such a good word, because that's exactly, they didn't put fences around it, but those signs were enough to scare us all away. We didn't go up there anymore.
Well, right. I mean, it's far out there to say that, but it's possible. Now, with some of the episodes that, we've had, that one particular, they just, what the norm is typically is when they locate these cryptids or creatures, what they do is they go in, they'll quarantine an area off, and they will have helicopters that will, they look different. They don't quite look like the one that you saw, what's kind of boxy. The ones that you're looking at, usually those can carry either military personnel, soldiers, that they can land or let them rappel out. They can land and a back opens up. It's also as a cargo. That's
what it looked like a Hummer, but a helicopter, like big and boxy, like that.
Yeah.
You could fit 40 people in the thing if you had to.
Was it a single blade or double blade helicopter?
It had a blade on the top and a blade on its tail.
Okay. So it was a heavy,
and it didn't make a lot of wind, down, because it flew low enough for me to see the thing, all of it, and it didn't have, you know how they have feet or rudders or whatever they're called?
Right.
It didn't have those on the bottom at all. It had a wheel or two.
Oh, so those
I can't really remember.
Those
but
are
it didn't have
personnel carrier, cargo carrier combination, kind of a large Huey helicopter personnel carrier. That's okay. Interesting. In going back to your friend, when now you guys were climbing up the hillside when it wasn't a building you were climbing up to, but a hillside, and that's when she felt something on her ankle?
Yes.
And
we cleared the roof, and like I said, the building is not built into the hillside, but the building and the hillside have maybe you could walk in between it, but that's it. They didn't dig into the hillside to build the building, but they built the building butt up against the hillside. So you could jump from the roof of the building to this cliff type thing.
Gotcha. So so it was you two went first, and you were on top, and she kind of dug in, but wasn't quite making it, and she needed your help.
No.
And
I went first. Jimmy went first. I went second. She went third.
Okay, and you made it, and you were on top trying to help her up because she wasn't quite making it.
Yeah, like I said, she was.
And then,
I don't want to call her fat, but she was a chubby little girl.
Right.
And we knew that she wasn't nimble and agile enough because she was always the last one. So we knew she needed help up the hill. So that's why we went first, because we knew we'd have to turn around and help her.
Right. So this thing, when you saw something when you were on the roof, did you see like a shadow sleek by or something, you said?
No, before we even got on the roof, I noticed that everything was quiet. And when I turned around, I saw the ears first. Like these look like dog ears. And I saw its face. I was at a body length away from the thing. Her body length away from it, like fighting it to get her.
But you didn't see it prior to grabbing her on the roof. You didn't see anything like that. I thought you had said that you thought you saw a shadow while you guys were on the roof of that company, but you didn't. You just saw it.
Jimmy said.
Okay.
What was that, or something like that? And we're like, whatever. And that's what made us think that I know that maybe it was, what is that? Can I call you right back? My daughter just had an accident.
Sure. Yep, call me right back.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I understand. Children, things happen. No problem.
Yeah, she's a handful and a half, boy. So go ahead with your questions.
Yeah. I think we left off. I was asking about when your friend was being grabbed, and you said that she was a little heavyweight and was kind of not so nimble, and she was trying to climb up, and you guys knew that you were going to have to help her. When you were helping her up, at first you didn't see anything, and you said just kick your boots off. And did this thing did it? Before, what kind of light was surrounding you? You said kind of a moonlight, but was it really bright out there? How were you able to see the definition?
In the park, there is a big street light in the park. And that hillside, hold on one second. That hillside, the opening is right in between a swing set and that wishing well I was talking about. And that street light is right after that wishing well.
Oh.
So the moon was bright enough that I could see. I could walk down the street and in the woods and be able to see, not everything, but I could see a good 10, 20 feet. I'm not real good with measuring. I could see well over a city bus length, in the circumference around me.
Gotcha.
Like it wasn't bright, but it was bright enough that, I could clearly see this thing. Because I could see her. I could see that her foot wasn't hung up on nothing. And I could see this thing. And I don't want to call it smoke, but I don't know, with mist or whatever, condensation coming out of its nose. I could see its skin, the patchy hair, sparse hair, but I couldn't see the bottom of it until it turned around.
Okay, I was gonna ask, at what point did you finally see what was hanging onto her ankle?
When I told her to kick, and then her leg warmer came off, and she was really screaming, like something was hurting her. And I looked, and looked again, like, because at first your mind doesn't, you're like, I'm not seeing that. That's not what I'm seeing. So I kept trying to, like, convince myself that that's not what I was seeing, and that's why I say a man in a mask or something.
Right.
That the circumference of its arms, like, it had thumbs, it had her.
Well, that's what
It would have to have been like $1 million robot to have faked this.
and it has.
You know what I mean?
You're right. You would have to have an opposing thumb to grab onto something too. You know,
Yeah.
dog.
I learned that, later in life.
Yeah, you just dog paws don't do that. They kind of hold down, but they don't have a grasping ability as humans.
And the way the scratches were on her legs, and this is what made me think demon, there were only like 3 and a thumb. There was like no pinky, if that makes sense.
Oh.
Like the way the gouges were on her leg, and like I said, she was a thick girl. I mean, not obese, but thick.
Sure.
Her calf, and this is where it got her. Like her, you know when you flex your calf muscle, that hump?
Yeah, the gastroc.
In the back.
Mm-hmm.
That's where some of it got, like the ring finger, middle finger, and first finger, and it like wrapped around, but the thumb was way down.
Oh.
Like its hand would have had to have been huge, like a basketball, the way the marks were.
Do you remember which ankle that was, or calf?
If she's left, because she's facing me. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I'm facing her. Her back is to the thing.
And you said that
Yeah.
she got a brief glimpse of what was hanging on to her, just for a moment?
I think I got a good look at it, because once I saw it, that's when I started praying. And I mean, it could have been 10 seconds, but it felt like way longer than that. I mean, me and this thing, like, looked at each other.
So it was, you could see the eyes. Could you see the pupils?
Yes.
Really?
No. It didn't. It all black eyes.
Oh, just all black eyes.
It had shine on it, like, a deer in the headlights?
Right.
Like that shine.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like when you take a picture of something and they have that shine, like a reflection or refraction of light.
Sure.
Almost like cataracts.
Oh,
like,
wow.
Like a film or something. I wanted to call it eye shine, but it was more like a film. And then, like I said, I got obsessed with trying to find out what this thing is.
Oh, right.
So I was looking at all kind of animals and how they blink and how, because I thought maybe it had like a film over its eyes, like to protect it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like how it can blink without closing its eyes, like a protective thing, like a membrane.
What did the teeth look like?
Pardon me?
What did the teeth look like? Did it have large
They
canines?
look like human teeth, but it had canine, like incisors, like fangs. And its molars were like ours. It had like horse teeth, if that makes sense. Like they were big, wide teeth. Like wide, not tiny. The fangs were small, thinner, but its teeth were like wide.
But it had like a muzzle, you say, like a canine muzzle.
Yes, but it wasn't very long, like a dog. It wasn't like a pug face, like, smashed in, or a Shih Tzu, but it did have a muzzle.
And again, it had ears pointing up like a Doberman Pinscher or German Shepherd.
Yes. And I don't remember its ears, like, turning for sound or anything.
Right.
The main thing stuck out with me was that smoke or that stuff coming out of its nose.
Yeah, when the breath is warmer than the surrounding air temperature, the ambient air temperature, you'll get a mist. You'll get like a fog. You'll get the breath that we see when everything gets cold around us. on exhalation.
Yeah, it was cold enough to see your breath.
Yeah.
But, like, I think it was like huffing and puffing because it was making a weird noise. And I never would have thought in a million years that it was elderly. But now, with the eye thing and the way it was huffing and puffing, the sparse fur, and its teeth didn't look healthy.
Interesting.
They weren't like pearly white, and they weren't yellow. They just looked, like an old dog.
Very.
Yeah, like my dog was 17 when he passed away, and his teeth were all cucky, like plaque, crusty.
Interesting.
I wonder if this thing went to those woods to die, away from like the pack.
Well, those are
Or
great.
if they left it there
We don't know. I mean,
to die.
we don't know the hierarchy of the social structures. We don't know that at a certain point, was he the dominant male and then he got beat out by a more dominant male, and then when that happens, he leaves the pack to fend for himself. We don't know these things, but that's not out of the question for sure. So fast forward to today, do you ever talk to that young man or that girl today about that at all? Do you ever make contact with them? What happened?
I talk to her quite often, but him. So when I found out what I think we saw, it was Facebook and whatever, and I contacted him. And I was like, and her, I set up like a group, chat thing so we could all talk to each other about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I don't want to talk about it, whatever. So I was like, oh, you haven't changed. But as far as her goes, I think like you said, she's more traumatized and she'll talk about it, but I'd say a lot of her thinks that it wasn't real. Do you know what I mean? But she's not willing to admit that was a flesh and bone being.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, many people, they can see it, but it's so far out of the realm of their understanding of what exists that it scares them terribly. Did your dad ever talk about it further later in life or anything about what he saw or anything like that?
I asked him one year at Christmas, you're just sitting around talking, and he's getting up there in age, and I was like, what really happened? It's probably 10 years ago. He's like, I can't remember. I'm getting old. I'm like, Dad, come on. You need to tell when your parents are joshing. And I said, what was with, the police? That's the angle that I wanted to know. I wanted to know, like, who did they call? What did they say? And he said, they kept me out of the loop. And he calls me honey. They kept me out of the loop, honey. All I know is that they went up there and put that fence up, and you kids weren't allowed up there anymore. And I said, well, what about the nesting? What do you think it was? And he was like, you just heard me. He didn't really want to, talk about it. I think it scared him.
Well,
I really do. Him and my uncle.
Absolutely. And, you just wonder if other types of sightings in that area previously to that, or even after that.
And something else that's weird. Right after this happened, my dad went out and bought a Great Dane. I think he bought the biggest dog he could buy to protect us.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And when we grew up in our house, we had just a little black dog, a mutt, a Toto-looking thing. He never liked big dogs. He said, big dogs, big problems. Big poop, big fights, big, everything. But he bought a Great Dane.
Wow. That is a big
And they don't live very long, and they were expensive back then.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Well, it's almost like he knew something, and he still you protect your kids. You don't want to scare them. After you told your parents, and what did Judy's parents think? Or your friend? I forget her name. What's her name? Father. I know she was really scared. What did they do? Did they?
Her mom believed us 100%. But her dad, like I said, he's a biker. He literally was in like Vietnam and all that. And he was like, these are bull. These are bull. This is all bull. That's all he kept saying. But when my dad locked the doors of the bar, her dad was in there. He went and got him. It was like all the men had this big meeting.
Oh, and your dad was included.
Yeah,
And
it was my dad's bar. This was when they went in the woods to look for the nest and the poop and all that. The EMTs, the police without belts on. I mean, I don't know that they were or weren't police, but I know they didn't have a gun belt. They had belts and shoes and everything like a policeman had, but no gun belt.
Did he ever discuss what that particular meeting was said?
No. That's what I specifically asked him that year at Christmas. I said, and we were trying to dibble and dabble in the conversation the best we could, but he put the jukebox on, and the way the bar was set up, it was shaped like a big letter L. The restaurant was in the back, the long part of the L, and then the bottom part of the L was the bar. And there was like kind of an angle and a wall. So, your dinner wouldn't get interrupted from the bar people, if that's
Sure.
the way that's set up, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I mean, you could hear, but you could hear like do you know what I mean?
Yes. Was there ever anything in the newspapers that you remember?
No, nothing.
And this was in a small town?
And my dad told me not to talk about it specifically. He said, don't go blabbing to all your friends, and don't tell nobody at Mommy's house, which meant like my neighborhood where I grew up in.
And this was again in a small town in Pennsylvania, correct?
Yeah, it's called.
A real terrifying encounter that you guys had, to say the least. How about the young man? Do you know if he ever told his parents?
They went and got his dad too. He lived 5 houses up the hill, and he lived directly like across the alley from me. So yeah, I don't know how his dad is his name. I don't remember if they called him or they went up there and got him. But he came, down and was talking to the police and stuff. Why do you think they go away when you pray? Even if you pray to yourself?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I guess a part of me, we're believers. We're Christians. We're believers. I don't want to say we're Bible thumpers, but I believe in a higher power that's greater than us, and I believe that when you go out, especially if you go out investigating, I believe a person needs to have all means possible to protect them, and I don't mean firearms. I mean, I think you need blessings. I don't know. That's a great question. I guess part of me wants to say that being these things aren't a normal, natural type of creature that we encounter every day. It's of a creature that are what we consider the beast. And this is the way I understand it personally for me and some of the other brothers, is that these are beasts of the Bible. And I'm not going to say that I am a heavy endowed theologian and I can explain everything, because I can't. But I'm just going to say in many scriptures they describe beast looking scary, walking upright, having claws, feline features, canine features, and it's
anything part man, part beast.
Yeah, anything
like
that's like that. And
goat man or the whatever.
And anything that can look like all an animal yet behave like a man, right? So, and have man-like thoughts. In other words, they have an ability.
And thumbs.
Yeah, have an ability to grasp. It's smarter than just your average deer or bear out in the woods. Let's just say that.
Do you think that they actually walk this earth? Because when I listened to that interview, the Ohio man, his interview, he said he was looking right at it and he couldn't see it. They come through like doorways or wormholes. Or do you think that they're actually flesh and blood creatures?
I think they're flesh and blood creatures. I'm not saying that there's not the existence of these on a physics level. I'm going to say, being flesh and blood, these things are so in tune to their environment, they can hide in plain sight. They know how to use the structures, the rocks, the trees to blend in so well, it's hidden from sight. And we can look right at a tree and they can be behind the tree. They know how to do it because they've been doing it for years and years and years and years. That's
like when you startle a squirrel and they stand real still.
Sure.
You know, but they're you know,
their
they just
movements
blend in. You can't see it.
Their movements are so in tune to their environment. They do nothing by accident. Nothing is by accident. Everything has purpose. Even the slightest little move has purpose and smoothness to it, where they can hide in plain sight.
Yeah, this thing didn't make any noise, even when it was running, breaking and leaves crunching, but it wasn't, for as big as it wasn't like, you know, thump, 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 or clop, clop, or nothing.
Right.
And it was agile.
Right. Well, that's another feature, is that how can they do that? Well, I think they have the ability on how they step in the woods. They have that affinity because they've had to be able to hunt. And if you make a lot of noise, what's the likelihood of you're not going to be able to eat? So they've had to develop an ability to be as quiet and stealthy as possible when they're out in the woods. So, you know, if that's second nature to you, then you're not going to hear them. And you're not going to see them until they want to be seen. So I don't get complicated with portholes and things like that when it comes to these. I just think that they're so well in tuned, they're so strong that they've been around and been so stealthy that they've been around and able to evade our sight for so long. They've been able to just stay in very remote areas. They are able to hunt and breed and grow. And I think that's why, to a certain degree, although I know we have a lot more technology that people can talk all over the world with the World Wide Web, but I think it seems and appears there's an increase in number of these because we have stories from long ago, but we also have a lot of recent encounters. And is there some misidentification of things that people may have seen or saw? Sure. But I would say that if you threw out 80% of those that may be misidentification or hoaxes or whatever, that leaves still a whole lot of encounters, that 20%, which are in the thousands, that are the real deal. Yeah, I mean, it's when you have one person that saw it, it's awful hard to prove it, but when you have 3 people that were right there, and you had additional people come into the scene or the story of the encounter, like your dad and then your uncle, when they went out there and they saw the scat from this and they didn't like what they saw and they went back and got a shotgun. So that tells me that they saw something not normal. It bothered them. It was out of the realm of what they're used to seeing, and so that's why he went back and got the shotgun, because either the size of it, and it was totally different than what he had ever seen before.
It looked like elephant poop. I mean, there was like that much of it. It was a huge pile of poop.
Wow. That's a big...
I mean, maybe not an elephant. I could be exaggerating a little bit, but okay, let's say a huge moose. I mean, it was bowling ball, football, big.
Wow.
Big pile.
That's big.
Yeah. So whatever left it had to be big.
Exactly. Did anyone ever cast any prints of that you're aware of at that time?
No, not that I'm aware of. But there were people, I want to say they were police, but they didn't have gun belts on. That's what makes me think that they weren't police.
Did they have
suits on? They went all down in the woods. They went up on, we call it the old lane. They were all up on the old lane. They even cut some trees down, but they didn't cut like so many down that they were logging. They didn't build a house.
Did they have suits on?
No, like police uniforms, but they were, like our police at the time wore black pants and a brown like khaki shirt. and they had like brown or khaki shirts, and I don't remember exactly what color pants, but they were dark pants. They had patches and badges, everything but the gun belt. I'm just so glad there's somebody trying to, collect all this and I don't know, document it or